And we are live. Hello, and you're listening to Let's Drone Out. Tonight, we are hopefully talking about lots of lovely iNav things, and we've got a special guest. Is it B1 Full Becky Tech? He's muted himself.
It's mute on.
Oh yeah, sorry. It's just Blackie, or just say Marc. It's also good.
Blackie, yeah. Everyone's favourite curry kitten.
Hello.
The man with the moustache, Stephen.
Cheers. Hello.
And I'm Brighton till I fly. Hello and welcome. Let's start the show. Yep, Stephen, this is a show that was arranged and sorted out by you. So if you'd like to take the lead.
So talked to Marc originally. I think picked an argument with Marc to be more accurate on one of his YouTube videos. And then we had a really nice chat. And it seems a great guy, and he's doing a lot of stuff with iNav, doing some very interesting things with wings. There's some interesting radio work that he's looked at. So he's done flying via 2G modems and things like this. He's just showing us his 3D printed plane. So I think we've got a lot of very interesting wing talk and kind of seeing what the cutting edge iNav stuff is going to be in the next release as well. So looking forward to interesting wing things.
Yeah, it does feel weird not having Pavel here and talking about iNav. It feels wrong. Should I have emailed him?
We can talk to him again.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Pavel also has a lot of other things in his head right now. He wants to dial down a little bit. So
I specifically was talking to Marc because he's running this iNav fixed wing group, right? So he's actually going and organizing a group, and they've got a monthly, very long form podcast, a couple of hours long, where they go really in depth about wing things. So that's the idea.
Is that the one with Falling with Style?
Say again, please.
The other one. Is that the
Falling with Style?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. D Falling with Style is also in there. Yeah.
Yeah. No worries. Yeah.
So yeah, what do we want to talk about first?
Tell us first about this very first plane you flew, because you were just showing us it, and you said the first plane I flew was 3D printed, and the first thing you did was reverse the ailerons, and I can't think how they wouldn't have splintered into a million pieces.
Yeah, I mean, the plane did splint into a million pieces after a very short flight. I think the advantage I had was it was my first flight. I never trained in a simulator whatsoever. All my stick feel I had. At this situation, yes, because all my stick feel I had was basically from video games, and so I was actively thinking what I'm doing, and that's why I really fast recognized that something is wrong, and I could just rethink in my head. If you build up the muscle memory, that's nearly impossible. Then there's no chance to control it inverted. I just can check out or look up my video. I have it on YouTube somewhere. Yeah, it was a 3D printed Spitfire. It's, I think, 90 millimeter in wingspan from 3D lab print. And that was my entry in the RC flight hobby in general.
So a lot of people start with very basic, easy craft. You started with a 3D printed plane. Like the first thing out the gate, you're like, what I need to start with is something that's 3D printed, not exactly a traditional approach to plane flying.
Don't start 3D printed. I learned from that, definitely. Don't do it, because your first landings will be relatively hard, and the 3D prints cannot really do that. I mean, there are some exceptions. For example, let me show that one in the camera. For example, small things like this one, printed in low weight PLA. Low weight PLA has the advantage it's pretty flexible compared to a normal PLA, so you can easily press it in. It's like thick paper, basically. It feels like thick paper, and it doesn't break that easily compared to a hard printed PLA. This stuff can hold up more, but it's nothing compared to foam, for example. And yeah, if you want, I can. I found the video. I can show you the clip from my first ever RC flight. So yeah, it was complete crap hardware. The motor had desyncs at full throttle, as you can hear.
I don't think we can't hear the video.
We can't hear it.
Yeah, I made it.
Okay. But yeah, oh, there it is. Well, it's in the air for quite a long time so far. That's a good sign.
I'm not saying too much, actually. It was also not the best idea to print it in transparent PLA.
Oh yeah,
to track against the sun.
Oh, good luck with the line of sight of that.
Oh no, it's back.
And then there was a wind gust from the left.
Oh,
and instinctively I corrected into the wrong direction, and that was the end of that flight. But it was my first RC flight ever, and I have some memories from it.
It was still more impressive than mine.
Nose
mine went instantly into the ground.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's hard. I mean, I have rebuilt it. The print time on a single printer is about 3 days. And at this time, I was visiting my parents over a holiday week, and I just printed a new one there. Basically, I drove back home, got my printer back to my parents to print the new plane there. And then I tried again. I think I
flew having you home with this.
Yeah, I mean, I at least did, I think, one pack flight on the second try that got some damage during landing. And I think a few weeks later, I looked for Model RC or RC plane club, actually, with a landing field and a nice meadow to land in. And there the guys told me how to fly an RC plane. And after that, it was much easier.
What was the trick?
Yeah, the trick was basically repeat it. Just fly circuits first. Very simple things, no crazy stuff. Don't change directions. Just fly really in a circle in one direction first for a whole time, then the other direction, and then you get a feel about the flying, especially if you fly towards you, that then the controls are actually inverted. So just step by step. I just wanted too much with that plane, and they were impressed that it's even possible to 3D print RC planes, but they also said it won't last long. And I think the one of the guys there, he did the first flight in the field completely, launch, a few rounds, then landing. Second flight, he launched, gave me the radio, I was flying, he was landing, and basically step by step. And then I trained the landing, and at the end I flew completely alone. So
what was your journey from then to go from that to FPV and then all the advanced iNav stuff that you're doing now?
From that, I basically then switched into quads, because I wasn't aware that there is really stuff with RC planes and these foam RC planes. I wasn't really aware of them. So the reason basically why I even started with RC was I was sick at home for 2 weeks. I binge watched YouTube, whatever it suggested to me, and at one point I suddenly saw an advertisement or a review video of the iNav A8 3D printer, and I found this 3D printing actually so cool that I ordered one because it was cheap. And then I had that printer and I thought, okay, now I have it. What else can I do than printing cubes? And this is how I started to think, okay, I wanted to have an RC plane some years in the past already as a child, and then I looked for it and I found out, okay, you can print one. Then I had this first experience with the plane, and then I came over quads and then started with that. But after a while, by the way, also 3D printed quads. So 3D printed frames and everything.
They will definitely break. I can tell you that.
Yeah, they did a few times. So I went through a few iterations of different frames I tried. And from there, then I found out, hey, there are fixed rings that are made of foam that are pretty crash resistant. And that's when I bought my first RC plane, and that was an AR Pro. Back then, I looked on the internet, tried to compare something cheap I can smash, I can damage, that doesn't hurt. So I was deciding between the S800 and the AR Pro back then. Oh no, the AR Ring 900. And at the end, it was the AR 900 just because of the bigger bay and less hassle to install stuff. And yeah, so I got the AR 900. I looked up for flight controllers, found a Wing flight controller, easy setup. I throw everything in, FlySky i6 radio with an X8B receiver. And yeah, I went out and flew it. So
Does
this was
sound
basically...
familiar to you, Curry? Yeah, all these wing models mean nothing to me. I'm more a quad guy.
Yes, they mean things, but it's all pretty much the same. Like foamies are several different styles. One is a wing type like that. The other is your more sort of traditional plane type stuff, like the pixel on the wall behind
so that
me.
guy looks like it's intended for FPV. It's got a really massive nose to shove cameras in, right?
Yeah, I mean they're much more useful. Base space is what it's all about. When I started off, I started flying an AXN, and that's because good old Bruce did a video about this. Let me just sort my camera out. There we are. Did a video about how to build one, but there was so little space. You had to chop it down just to fit a 2200 battery in, and then you had to try and crash sort of a camera somewhere in a VTX. If you want to do any sort of AP, it's like, where's that going to sit? It's not going to sit in. So these modern wings, having these huge bays which can take humongous batteries and a place for a flight controller and cutouts for a camera already, and nice sort of trailing for the ESCs, and even have wing slots cut for your like receiver GPS and stuff. Just much better. Just built for purpose these days.
Yeah. So fun fact, this is my third AR Ring 900 because after a while they just get damaged or smashed or whatever, and I rebuilt it a few times, and it's still the exact same flight controller I had in my first one. After now 4 years or 5 years, still working. And nowadays I just use this one as a iNav development test platform, basically for wings. And I just built a Big Slot 2 with an F405 WSE flight controller, basically the newer, smaller variant of that one, to have also a test platform with a normal RC plane or normal plane design with elevator and rudder. And I crammed it full of sensors just for things we might develop in the future for iNav and test that out.
So F405, the way to go then in general. You've got an F405 STD or something, the original one?
No, I don't have many quad flight controllers. I have an in my old test platform plane.
I'm just trying to remember what the early version of that wing controller was called.
Yeah, I think it was basically a F405 STD, yeah, standard.
Okay.
That was the quad version. I mean, you see, if you watch what flight controllers Matic has released over the last years, they have really focused on fixed rings. That's their top-notch area.
Yeah. The form factor is not quad at all. The form factor is this odd kind of dual stack thing that you couldn't fit into any quad frame, really.
Yeah, they have quad flight controllers, of course, but I think the community, the quad community, has completely focused on the big quad brands like Diatone, DJB flight controllers, for example, sometimes even Omnibus, and Holy Bro. I think these are so the top flight controllers that are used in the quad community, less Matic. Matic has a few.
I've got an H743 somewhere on this bench, which I intend to put into a quad, Matic one, because I think it's actually the best 20mm H7 controller you can get. You get that and a T-Motor H7 at 20mm, and the T-Motor, it looks okay. It's got a single gyro, the Matek's dual gyro. The T-Motor has direct VBAT going out to the VTX. The Matek's got a 10-volt back on it, or an 8-volt back. It's a really nice flight controller, but
But the dual gyro is actually interesting because I still wonder why Maytag even does dual gyros. Because I remember from the F765 ring flight controller, that's this one here.
Gyro Fusion.
Big baby. No flight control software does gyro fusion, not even autopilot.
Betaflight does.
Really? Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, in this case, of course, it makes sense. On the ring flight controller, it makes a little bit less sense. Maybe they thought iNav might get it in the future.
You can also look, and if one of them has like loads of noise problems for whatever reason, maybe it's had a little damage, then you can just swap to the other one.
Yeah, that's true. The F765 has an MPU 6000 and an ICM 211 something, and the ICM is absolute garbage. It's unusable even on fixed strings.
Yeah, that's my concern. They keep changing the gyros on the Maytag boards. They're up to like version 3 now, and you have to check. And like this one has these 2 gyros, the next version has 2 other gyros, and the third version has 2 other gyros. And it's like trying to memorize phone numbers. It's challenging.
Yeah, but it's actually only a problem on the H7 flight controllers. The other ones are pretty much consistent. I think they are all using ICM 48 something right now. They are all using the current ICM gyros. The only exception is the
4866P or something, 42688P. I think.
Yeah, the only exemption is the F411WTE that uses the Bosch BMI 270 gyro.
Where do they get these names from? What does WTE mean? I was trying to decipher their weird.
F411W for wing and TE wing, third edition.
Third edition. What? Third edition, not 3? Like W3? No.
That's
too easy?
The F411 wing. Then was the WSE for ring second edition, the small one, and the WTE is the one with the USB-C connector.
That's not helpful.
That's weird.
It's even more funny with the F405. F405 wing is the one here. F405 WSE is the smaller one with the external USB. Then there's F405 WTE for the third edition. That's the one with ExpressLS on and Wi-Fi on top.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the ExpressLS or Wi-Fi. You can switch the firmwares.
Yeah, I was under the illusion they could do both for a while, and I found out no, it cannot.
Yeah, I just ordered my first one, and there is the F405 WMN. That's the Ring Mini.
Does not compute.
Did you do HDTE?
What?
And there's TE.
Well, that hasn't got a W in the name, so it's not for a wing, is it? Surely.
So that's high definition.
I wonder what they mean.
Oh, yeah. Why don't they just use numbers? Oh.
The HD versions, of course, have no OSD chip, and that's also the third edition.
Oh my god, this is.
It's like alphabet soup, isn't it?
It might as well be.
They're great boards. They really are very well made, but my word, the numbers.
They are slightly hard to choose. Once you've chosen one, it's just like, oh, I know how this one works. I want to buy this one again. And then they sort of, they've stopped making that one now. They have to find a new one.
Yeah. I mean, I have a big variety of Maytag boards now, but that's mostly because there's a new board coming out, and I asked Samsung, hey, this and this looks nice, or I have a question. Do you want one? Okay. And then he sends it to me. So this is mostly the reason why I have so many different Maytag boards. Usually I just buy the F405 series or the F765 for bigger planes, and that's it. I haven't one single H7 board.
Yeah, I'm just a sucker for the shiny. So I decided there wasn't much difference between an F7 and an H7, so I started to buy H7s. But something else I noticed on your channel is you had this incredible flight that you'd done where you were controlling the wing over GSM. Could you tell us how you got
Yeah, this was not controlling the plane over GSM. The GSM just delivers the telemetry to me. What I did is I was making a waypoint mission that I flew out of the city because I launched in that park. Back then I didn't have a car, so I had to fly somewhere in that park that I can reach by foot or by tram. And yeah, from there I flew a waypoint mission, and there's a GSM module. It's called with a firmware on it that is called Bullet GCSS. And this module basically is an ESP32 board with a SIM module on it. I think it's a SIM 700L or SIM 800L. I'm not sure right now. Connects to your internet provider and sends the data out to how's it called? QTT server. And from there, it's the data are just shown on a website where you have basically a full telemetry screen. Exactly that, yeah. So this is just a website. This feature, this QTT support, is also implemented in the multi-replaner ground control station software that only runs on Linux or on Windows 11 with the Linux subsystem. And you can basically follow your plane from there. At this stage in the development, there is no way to send any commands to the plane. So it's only for monitoring and getting telemetry.
Purely telemetry.
No. It's running over MSP. There are plans to implement some basic commands back to the plane, like just trigger a return to home, for example, or similar stuff. Not active control because it's just too slow for that. But the developer unfortunately didn't have much time over the last year, so there wasn't any progress. But it is working.
It's still fantastic. I mean, for our audio viewers, we're looking at a web page, Bullet GCSS, that's showing something that has a map display on one side with the current location, and the other side shows the telemetry that you're getting back, similar to kind of the Yahoo telemetry screen. So you've got your horizon lines, heading, voltages, your location and GPS coordinates, satellite numbers, the distance to home, battery, and all that. And the effect is pretty impressive for a basic open source project that is still under development. I mean, yeah, I can't fault this thing. It's a ton better than what you can get off a radio. It really makes you think about some of the possibilities once you start to just shove data through a mobile phone.
A while before that flight, I did another project with my Talon GT, and I was flying a more than 70-kilometer long waypoint mission with it, and that was out of reach of my radio link. So it was planned far away from any populated area, low altitude, completely autonomous flying, and I knew that at some point the RC link will drop. The video link was gone because I was basically flying behind a hill that is close to me, and I had no feedback at all if the plane was even still flying until I think it took 22 minutes until I saw the first glimpse of FPV signal on my monitor back, and that was such a big relief. And for such kind of things, this project is actually
this is the bit where
perfect.
The GPS data ducks out, right? Yep, there we go.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. This module, it's a very cheap one. I think it was $25 or so. It's only 2G connection, and 2G here in Germany was ever and is still very unstable.
I don't even know if we have 2G still.
I think UK has 2G already completely disabled, as far as I know.
At least for 3G ones.
It's like 3D to Edge or something, doesn't it? And then it gets worse from there.
Yeah.
So this is below 3.
There are 4G modules as well, but they are a little bit heavier, a little bit bigger, and they cost like 4 times that of the 2G module. And just for an experiment, I decided to go for the 2G one. Yeah. But the next time, I will definitely use a
3G or 4G would be you're talking to multiple towers. With 2G, you talk to a single tower and you send data to that tower. And when you're out of range, you need to change towers. You've got to stop sending data, connect to another tower, and then start sending data. Whereas with 3G and 4G, that handover is more seamless. You're connecting to multiple different towers. Yeah. So when you go out of range of one, you don't have this black spot where you freeze for a second before you move to the next tower.
I think the interesting idea flying a waypoint mission like that is, of course, you have to set your aircraft to say, in the event of a fail-safe, carry on going, because you've lost your radio signal, obviously, but you then have to trust that your waypoint's going to continue, and well, at least you're able to track it. I bet you've never watched a screen quite so intently as you are when you're watching something fly away that far.
This was not the blind version. The blind flight. The blind flight was a few months earlier. So here I had complete control. But indeed, when I lost the control and I just had my FPV feed and my telemetry, I really stared at that monitor. And even more problematic was, back then I used the R9 on ACC-ST protocol, and there was this nasty R9 or FR-Sky ACC-ST bug that if you regain connection after a failsafe, there is like a 20% chance that half of your RC channels glitch to zero for a short moment on reconnect, and this can actually cause a disarm of the plane or a mode switch, and that's not funny. Yeah, that's not fun. No, that's not fun. That's why during that long-range mission where I knew I would not have RC link, I flew out to a point where I still had a stable connection, and then I pulled the module off my radio to intentionally cause a failsafe myself, because when you go into failsafe, everything is fine. The problem is if you return to from the failsafe, and then I let it fly until it came back and I had stable video, and only after I had stable video I plugged the module back in. And this was when the glitch happened and the plane went out of mission mode into acro. But luckily at that point I could take over and manually trigger return to home.
And people wonder why R9 didn't catch on. Wow.
I mean, I use Access now for 2 years, and with Access you don't have these problems anymore. Access just works.
You're actually still using the R9 software on an R9. You haven't just gone to Express LRS on it then?
We had this discussion a while back. I think I agree with Mark on many things, but I'm skeptical on this point. I think skeptical is the correct word.
I mean, I know Express LRS works for many people, but also Express LRS had issues in the past. We had in the iNav fixturing group, we had on Express LRS 3.0 shortly after release, and I think 2.6 something or so. We have 3 lost planes because of Express LRS. There seemed to be a bug that if you failsafe at a big distance, for example, then you regain control. After a few minutes after regaining control, the receiver just locked up. It didn't report a failsafe to the flight controller. It just locked up all channels, and if you are in acro at this point, the plane will just go down at set throttle and crash. Ooh, we had 3 people that had that problem.
Did you report the bug? Did they find out why?
We never couldn't replicate it. Actually, we didn't want to replicate it. I'm not sure if the people have replicated. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't my planes. We just got a report of that. Why.
I know the developers were keeping the modules connected across, through brick walls and things, and leaving them running for 24 hours to test that they worked and stuff like this. But I hadn't heard of that. That's really interesting. I wonder what would cause that. Okay.
No idea. So yeah, this is basically the stuff I mostly do with fixed strings. I love long range flying and just testing out what's possible. Where are the actual limits? My furthest distance for a long range flight so far was 32 kilometers, and I just had to turn around because. Okay, you will laugh now because our ceilings issues. But that was not R9's fault. That was because I really completely messed up the antenna installation. I basically
Sorry, I was going to say, what's the total flight distance you're doing on these flights? I can see the home distance, but how many kilometers are you doing?
On this flight, I have no idea. But usually when I do a long-range flight, with the Talon GT, that blind flight was, I think, 79 kilometers total.
Wow.
If I remember correctly. Yeah, I think it was 79. And just recently I did the first endurance test with my XUIV Clouds. That was 64 minutes, and after that I got too cold and bored and I landed. And I think it managed to get 80 kilometers or something with just a third of the battery.
Wow. Wow. That's built for autonomous flight then, because you can't maintain focus in FPV for that time.
Yeah, especially not with the goggles on the whole time. This is a 3-hour flight plane, so yeah. You usually do that in autonomous modes. Often when I fly long range without waypoint missions, I just put it into 3D cruise mode, just send it into a heading, and then sometimes I take away the goggles, just relax a little bit, then watch, okay, everything is fine. I have my telemetry on the radio, I see what the plane is doing, if it keeps altitude. So this
For our
is
audio
the
viewers,
easiest way.
Wayne's assistant has decided to join us this evening. Is this Poppadom here?
Yeah, she's decided the microphone looks a good place to rub her face, and she's just being annoying.
What the pop filters for cats to rub their faces on.
What is it?
I think it's worship me, pay attention to me, acknowledge me. All these things, very helpful. But yeah, some impressive distance records you've managed to achieve here. Just absolutely fantastic, and taking quite a gamble on things like the 2G module. There's no really great way to field test it other than just put it in a wing and send it. So kudos, it's very impressive.
In the meantime, or nowadays, we have stuff to test it actually without going to the field, and I think that's maybe a good point to where we could transition to the new iNav 6 stuff. Because there we have a nice feature where we actually can test stuff on the bench like we would do in flight without risking anything.
The possibility to test your interesting software configuration without trashing hundreds of choose your denomination of wing and hardware. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Do tell us.
Exactly. So, I think we should start with that point. iNav 6 will get a new feature, or has a new feature, that is called HITL simulation. So you have a complete hardware in the loop simulation. That's why I showed you this F765 with just a receiver connected before. Okay. What you can do with that is you connect the flight controller via USB with your PC, and then you start the X-Plane flight simulator. It's a really physical simulated flight simulator with a specifically for that purpose designed plane. Okay. Basically a virtual RC plane as a plugin, and as soon as you start or you load the world with that plane, it will give you a message to connect to a flight controller that's connected to the PC. And what's happening here is that the X-Plane completely simulates the real airplane while the flight controller is doing the calculations and all the stuff it can do,
including GPS position, everything.
Wow. GPS position, compass, heading, even the physics is simulated, like G-forces if you do turns.
So you can tell X-Plane to give you a side wind, and you can make sure that your plane can fly okay with the side wind.
Exactly. So it's basic for the flight controller. It controls a real RC plane. There's no difference. I can even use iNav radar, for example. Have someone else with X-Plane on the same area, or a second PC also with X-Plane, also with a flight controller, also with iNav radar, and even that would work with each other. And you could see the other plane on your OSD in the flight simulator.
Okay. What's the interface that it uses? Because presumably you've got to feed it gyro data, accelerometer data, GPS, everything.
Yeah, this all runs over the MSP protocol, and there's basically code in iNav that accepts the simulated data and basically bypasses the IMU and all the sensors. It just takes over the sensor output and bypasses the
ESCs, or does it bypass the output too?
It also bypasses the outputs, so all outputs are disabled, And unfortunately, in X-Plane, we cannot simulate servo movement. So X-Plane just gets pitch, roll, yaw inputs and throttle inputs from the flight controller back. So real servo simulation.
The mixer still works on the flight controller?
The mixer doesn't even matter. You can set up... I think you need at least a pitch, roll, yaw mix set up, but it doesn't matter what servo you set it to. It just have to be there. So the controls are sent to X-Plane.
Oh, okay. So it takes the RC controls. It doesn't take the mixed controls to the servos and motors.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So you can basically set up your plane and check, even on a non-development basis. If you're thinking about like setting up your radio, you could put all your modes on. You could check, is auto launch what happens if I press this? Is my return to home on the right switch?
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Oh, that sounds really cool.
Exactly. You can use it for that. Yeah, I even used it. I was just for fun planning a long-range mission, a one-way trip mission, over a very big distance, and I run that mission just in X-Plane first to just see if I have ground clearance everywhere, so I don't mess up the waypoints. So I load the mission into the flight controller, run it on X-Plane, everything is fine, and then I know if I use the same mission file loaded on my rear plane, it will work exactly the same.
So X-Plane takes real Google Earth or Google Map data, does it? So you know all your height maps and stuff.
It is based on the real world. It's not with an online connection, so the worlds are stored offline. Basically a classic older flight simulator. It's not like Microsoft Flight Simulator that uses real-time satellite imaging. So it doesn't have the detail level of Flight Simulator 2020, for example.
Okay, so you don't get fake buildings appearing, but you've still got basically your height map. So if you're flying and like there's a mountain in the way, you're going to hit it unless you go up, for example, and you can try out your flight plans and adjust them, and then when you go and do it in real life, you've already done it like half a dozen times. You're good.
Yeah, you also see virtual power lines in the plane, because they created this simulated world based on real satellite data, just narrowed it down in low resolution stuff so it doesn't blow up your SSD. And a lot of things, I would say everything that was in the real world 5, 6, 7 years ago, that's maybe the date of these map information, will be in the simulator as well. So yeah, that's one of the cool features of iNav 6, and
that's incredible.
And as Darren just said in the chat, it really is a very crucial tool now for the iNav development, and that's also where we come to the other features that will come now. A lot of that stuff was just tested in the simulator first, and then compared to the real world, and it's so close to realistic if you compare it, especially the navigation system changes we made. When you
some interesting unit tests.
Yeah, exactly. There's, for example, a new feature. Let me share you my screen again quickly. Fixed wing waypoint course tracking and turn smoothing. What it basically does is, for waypoint missions, you come from that direction, from a previous waypoint. Here is your current waypoint, and in that direction there's the new waypoint. What iNav can do now, it can plan the turns ahead instead of just hitting it and then looking for the next one. There are two methods you can set up. One is that the waypoint will be flown on the outside of the actual waypoint. This is an old variant here, so it was changed a bit later. Or you can just cut the corner on the inside. And this is just stuff where you change the navigation system when it really helps to simulate that first. Because sometimes you make a change, then you need to test it. You have to drive out, you have to go to the field, you have to set up everything up, you have to fly, you test it. Then if it doesn't work as expected, was it maybe a plane issue? Was it the wind? Was it something else? No, you just flash it to the flight controller, test it in the simulator. Now it's not working. Okay, then another change. It's so much easier to do things like that with this feature. And basically, this is, by the way, this change how it works now. iNav is able to navigate on the actual waypoint track instead of just pointing at the waypoint and plan smooth turns. Of course, it will not do really smooth turns if the angles are that tight as here. But if you have angles like this, it will go on the outside, for example, then back on the path track. On the outside, back on the track. And the same accounts for the cut method that just makes nice, smooth turns on the inside and exactly follows the track. And this was even with wind enabled in the simulator.
That's pretty cool.
This is basically also the way autopilot can navigate, and now iNav can do.
So, what is iNav trying to become autopilot, or is it trying to seek some identity that is different to autopilot here?
Nah, I think the biggest difference still is, and that will hopefully ever be the difference. iNav flies different. iNav just feels different on the sticks. You can compare it. If you fly autopilot feels, if you fly in acro mode, for example, feels like a video game. It doesn't matter, you can go full throttle, you move the stick at a certain range, the plane does exactly the same movement like with low throttle and lower speeds. It's way more consistent, and I think it's less nice to fly with autopilot, especially in acrobatic things, or you do proximity stuff, you fly through gaps. It doesn't matter if it's a quad or a fixed wing. You don't just have that flight feel with autopilot like you have with other flight controllers. iNav tries to fly fixed wings the way like you would fly it without a flight controller in it if you are in acro mode, for example. It just assists you a little bit with the pit controller, but mostly it's the same control scheme like with no flight controller at all. And that's mostly the big difference. Of course, autopilot has so many more features for safety stuff. They have their possibility to get their stuff certified for industrial use, for safety applications, all this kind of stuff. iNav is never intended to do that, things like that.
You think autopilot, you have to say the word over-engineered at some point, don't you? There's a lot to
sometimes,
it.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. They really concentrate on their feature set, on their reliability, on their precision, especially for navigation stuff, less on the usability, I would say. And I mean, just the configurator proves that.
Yes, indeed. Since we've got you here, would you like to try and diagnose my launching? That last week... Was it last week? Was it? I can't remember. It was bloody cold, and I went out to try and retest. I can't find it now.
Could you feel your fingers? Because I think we might have figured out what the problem is.
Yeah, it could be that. And I had a successful launch the first time, and then I completely lost my video signal, which is a problem. So I'll show you what that looked like. Here's number one launch, and we're auto launching. I get on the sticks pretty quickly because usually I launch with goggles, but in this case, launch line of sight, put my goggles on, and then I said, "Oh, this is looking a bit crap on the VTX," and then the signal went completely because, as it turned out, my MMCX adapter had fallen out, and then I was left with that.
That killed a quad and a GoPro recently for me.
Yeah, here's my other two launches. We throw them, we go upside down, and we land on the nose.
See, Jack, Sticky Jack's Glue Emporium. The world needs it.
I think I know why. Can you go back to... Yeah.
Dunk. There's one.
Yeah, I know why.
Go on then.
Because you bumped the sticks when you threw it. It went directly after it left your hand out of auto launch into horizon mode.
Well, I thought that on the first one. If I bring that back, I can get it on the first one because I see it go from angle... and it goes to horizon. But in the second one, how do we play this slower? See if we can do it.
The settings bit.
Yeah, it's
where's that?
Cog.
The cog. Where it says
where the HD symbol is, the red, with the red flag.
Yeah,
let's play
speed.
0.25.
You don't want that.
Was that too slow?
Oh, yeah.
God.
Ready for launch. So it's in angle. We're doing the throw.
And
it's still in angle.
Click.
And
Now it's out of angle. It's way too fast.
Yeah.
It's way too. Okay. It's way too fast. It went out of auto launch. Also on your first launch when you launched it and then have taken over. If auto launch is set up correctly, you don't have to take over. You just throw it, and you turn around, and you go to your chair.
I'm so used to doing it because I wear glasses. Normally, I launch with my goggles on, so I'm launching blind. You know the thing: arm, throttle in the mouth, up, throw, get back on the sticks immediately, and sort it out. But I haven't got to grips with letting iNav take over stuff very well.
There's a feature in the auto launch settings where you can force you to do the right thing, and this is a minimum launch time you can set. And I set that on all my planes to 2 seconds. So after the launch is triggered, for 2 seconds, every stick input on the radio is ignored by iNav. So you cannot accidentally bump the radio and abort the launch procedure.
Writing that one down.
Look at that. Even Mr. D says.
I like that. So launch time. Yeah, because I think also it was cold and I'm probably shivering. So I'm doing that. And I think that would cause the gimbals to move.
Then some people like very loose gimbals, especially quad pilots like that, and then it just sometimes is enough to shake the radio when you launch it, and that aborts the auto launch, and the plane lands in the dirt.
It is interesting leaving it completely to the auto. Even back in the olden days, when I remember the My Fly Dream autopilot was being used, that had an auto launch. There was a challenge we set up with 2 of my friends. They had to auto-launch their planes. They leave their radios on the thing. They go and throw them. And whoever could walk back the coolest without looking at their plane was the winner. And even though they were in competition and being filmed, one of them broke into a run instantly and grabbed his radio because it's a hard thing to let go of. That
so
sort
with
of,
auto-launch,
control.
if any of the sticks move at all, it breaks out of auto-launch. There's not a threshold. As soon as the stick registers change.
Well, that's what this time thing is.
There is a threshold. I think Darren might know it better. It's 20% deflection in each direction. 15 or 20% is the new default threshold. So yeah, if you do the auto launch, 1 second, let me.
Caroline's got the way to do it. Like you just toughen up. Just leave the TX on the chair. Don't even.
What I could do
is
not just leave the TX on the chair. I could do hold both wings and do the over the head launch, and that's proper commitment, then, isn't it? Also, it's a better launch because you're not doing a side throw.
It's good for your back.
So
stretch you out.
I'm not sure if you have seen that video.
When you're flying.
I made that video how to basically launch a Delta Ring, because Delta Rings are harder to launch than a normal LC plane. And as you can see here, I go for the throw. Okay, first I explain a few things.
Like a trained athlete. Look at him. Lining up the throw.
Whoop. And then it just goes away. So if the plane is tuned well, the PIDFF control or just the auto tune is completely fine, and auto launch is set up properly, there's nothing more you have to do basically.
There's the over the head, going for the big hurl. Really give it some move.
This is basically my explanation part already.
This is the to the moon maneuver.
You go away.
Oh, your browser has lost connection to the camera.
Don't be mean to her.
I'm not. She just keeps rubbing the microphone. It's not helpful.
I like her little purring.
Yeah. This wing's always been a pain. It's the Flux wing made by, I can't remember who makes it, but it's very, very narrow wings, and it takes a little while to get going. So it needs a hefty throw.
The Flybot Flux?
Yeah.
Yeah, a friend of mine has that. And even that ring, we usually launch overhead. although it's so small. But because you have so much, the weight distribution is weird. Because the wings are very, very light, but that carbon frame in the center is so heavy, it's very hard to throw it with a side toss without spinning it, actually. So that's why we usually throw it either overhead or just grab it with one hand and then at the nose and just put it over the head with one hand.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with overhead stuff. I don't have a problem with foam wings thrown with one hand and just sitting back and watching it go in the air. It's just these the Flybot ones they are weird, but they're quite quick. So I wanted to get a wing for wing racing next year because I promised I would do some wing racing, and I thought it's quite fast.
So
that might do it.
But I can't tell from Jojo
because after I threw it in the mud 3 times, it stopped working because it was like, oh, my VTX is full of water right now and I don't work anymore. So I had to stop there and go home. But
yeah, that comment from Jojo is interesting. I think he refers to was it Adam G, or I think it was Adam G who built his big track. And he launched it for I think it was the first time. And then he was looking for the plane, walking back to his transmitter and stepped on the radio. And this aborted the launch. And in the time he needed to pick it up, the plane went full throttle down into a fence and was...
I'm looking for that video right now. Damn it. I'm literally looking for it as we speak. It's like, oh man, who was it again?
I think it was Adam G.
Yeah, Adam G. Yeah, what was it? I thought it was the Drac, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's his track. Yeah.
Oh,
I can't find it. I honestly,
people wonder why I haven't been in a rush to build these wings. Like with a quad, like how do you launch a quad? Well, I plug the battery in, I leave it next to my foot. And I just whammy the throttle hard enough that it isn't on the ground anymore, and that's it. The biggest problem with a quad is launching too gently and doing that embarrassing sort of forward tip and then chewing up the grass and just getting stuck upside down.
I literally cannot find that video.
That slightly reminds me of my friend with the power line video, Jack, where he was flying around. And then his transmitter battery ran out, and he thought, not a problem, I'll put it into circle mode or whatever, and I'll just change my batteries. And he took the batteries out, and this thing's failsafe wasn't set up right. So he's like, oh, you mean continue on my path? And off it went, and he couldn't get the batteries back in quickly enough to get it back.
Am I allowed to play that video?
Yeah, play the video. Somehow it went on for like 7 miles. And went through the middle of power lines without touching any. Have you got it there, Jack? You can.
Yeah, hang on.
We featured this as our Halloween clip a couple of years ago. Oh, we Mark, have you done this as well? Was it your clip?
I didn't know. It was not my clip, but I did the same, and it was 14 kilometers. It flew until it crashed because of dead battery, and I found it back. I got it back 3 months later.
Oh, you got it back at all? It's a minor miracle there.
All right, ready?
Yeah.
I've got it.
That is, by the way, this flight controller.
I don't know what the sound's going to be like, but
I don't think we necessarily need sound. But yeah,
here
we are.
The sound is fantastic because you can hear the sound of electricity.
Everything's normal. Everything's fine.
Jeez.
Nothing wrong here. It's all fine.
Yeah. So yeah, somehow after 7 miles and the battery being out, this thing calmly glided down on its fly-by-wire one, whatever it was, an RG pilot, and did a perfect landing, better landing than we would have had at the field. I'm assuming.
This is really crazy.
That
is one of the most scariest things. That makes my penis want to crawl up inside myself.
That was what, by the way, also when I was completely fresh in the hobby and I built my first AR ring. I just finished basically the setup and the tuning as far as my knowledge was back then. That's basically an auto tune. That was it. And I wanted to test waypoint missions, but my FlySky radio has so short distance or so short range that I thought, hey, what would happen if I disable the face save and say do nothing? And then I went out,
right?
flew the waypoint mission. It wasn't anything bad first. I flew the waypoint mission, but every time I turned off the radio, the good thing is with these FlySky radios, they are back on in 2 seconds, not like half a minute until OpenTX has booted. So I turned off the radio, and then the plane went out of waypoint mode back into acro, so it was slowly going down, and I turned it back on, catched it, and said, okay, it's not working. Then instead, let's test how long the battery lasts. I went into 3D cruise mode, and I flew around in cruise mode, and then suddenly I went behind a few trees and lost connection.
That's how an expert does it. You see that?
No!
Nailed it.
Have you got the
You see the cringe in his shoulders, and you hear the impact. I think you hear the impact in the video.
Yeah.
See that again. Watch it. He's absolutely got control of the situation. There he is. Look, he knows exactly. No, he doesn't know anything. He destroyed it.
There's even time for him to go like this and put his hands on his head, like, what have I done? Just before the plane goes in.
How comes it's not playing the sound?
Because I didn't add sound, I guess. I wouldn't have thought we'd be able to hear the thud. Do you want to hear cussing?
Hang on.
Oh, my word. Okay. I muted it. Hang on. Let me just see.
My focus became more on those trees than it did on doing a good throw.
So we heard the arm. Interesting foot throttle method.
At this moment, what's going through my mind is that wasn't a very good throw. Quickly, let's get back to the transmitter. And here was my biggest mistake. Like a clumsy idiot, I'll go and step on the transmitter, and I must have kicked the elevator stick and therefore cancelled auto launch. You can see at this point it's actually a good angle of attack, and it would have recovered if I hadn't kicked the transmitter. But you'll see in a second the drastic change in angle.
I think the important thing is he saved money by not spending
Once
£3 on the next
transmitter
strap.
in my hands, I'm looking up and I'm actually expecting it to be
He's
above
well
the
happy
tree
about that
somewhere,
at this point.
and wondering why I can't see it. Just remember that all of this happens within the space of 3 or 4 seconds. At this point, there's not really much I can do. I drop the throttle when I see where it is, but within a split second, it's already hit the fence.
Yeah, so neck straps, guys, not necessarily the worst idea.
And then here's that same incident again from the DVR recording. And at the very last frame that you see here, before it completely cuts out, you can see I was doing 142 kilometers an hour on impact, which is just over 88 miles per hour. So here are a few pictures of the damage from that incident. As you can see, the nose has snapped clean off, but it's not that bad considering what happened. I think if it had been any other plane, it would have been absolute confetti. But the drag foam is just such tough stuff. So,
Adam G, you legend.
I've seen. I was in a ring on a hobby ring race event, and with my first AR ring back then, and I have seen an S800 split in half by one of the wires that held these big inflatable gates up.
Well, the guide
wire. Yeah, these guide wires that hold the gates vertical, and he hit that wire at around 100 kilometers per hour. It was one plane coming in, 2 planes coming out.
No way!
That's going to be amazing to see.
That would have been amazing on video. Film everything, no matter how mundane you think it is.
Mm-hmm. I have it on video, but I can't remember the title right now to look for it.
That's very impressive.
So, yeah, want to get back to a few of the new iNav stuff, or?
Yeah, go for it. So we're about
just
to
asking
drop
because
version 6, right? So it's all new.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about the navigation stuff, waypoint stuff, with smoother path tracking, all that stuff. And the biggest improvement in 6.0 is the so-called AHRS, centrifugal force compensation. The AHRS is the attitude heading reference system. That's basically the code in the flight controller that iNav has, Betaflight has, Autopilot has, every flight controller has, to use the sensor data and calculate how the current attitude of the craft is relative to the ground and relative to the Earth, basically. And the biggest problem of nearly all flight controllers, not only iNav, also others like Betaflight, I've even seen it on Vector, is so-called horizon drift. And that's basically, just as an explanation for the viewers, that's basically if you make turns or if you change direction or change speed, you have g-forces induced, and the flight controller or the IMU cannot distinguish between the gravity and these g-forces. And if these g-forces go to any side direction or to the front or to the back, the accelerometer thinks, in quotes, that this is the actual gravity direction and realigns the artificial horizon to that new gravity vector. And this is called horizon drift. And if you fly in any navigation mode or in any flight mode that works with self-leveling, this self-leveling is aligned to that now tilted horizon. And this was especially on iNav a very big problem in the past, because the way the iNav AHRS worked was too much relying on the accelerometer. This was mitigated in iNav 2.4 or 2.5 to reduce the drift, but it was never completely resolved. But finally, there was one developer who came from Japan, who said, okay, let's go on that issue. And he is the one who understands the code of iNav well enough, especially the IMU code, the sensor code. He understands the math behind this algorithm that is needed, and he had the coding skills to completely fix that by using the GPS data to estimate how much g-force is currently applied to the plane or to the quad while doing a turn. And with knowing that how much g-force and in which direction these g-forces are applied to the craft, he can remove these from the calculations of the gravity vector. So the craft now always knows where the ground is, where down is, and we have no horizon drift anymore.
So this is why if you put the horizon lines up in Betaflight or other quad firmware and you do lots of aggressive acro moves, it takes a while for them to catch up. They sort of flutter around and go crazy, and then they settle down. And iNav, if you were on a very long bank turn, it would lose track of where down was, because it would just start to normalize down as being the direction that you weren't accelerating in. And it would kind of put down away from the direction you're turning.
Exactly. We had actually two approaches from two independent developers. They started that project at the same time. The other approach was to just get the code from Autopilot, what they do, and completely port it over to iNav. And that was a lot of work, but there were a few remaining issues this developer unfortunately could not resolve. So it was perfectly fine in navigation modes, but as soon as you had strong winds, that changes your ground speed depending on the direction very strongly. Or if you fly aerobatics like loopings or a lot of rolls, then the AHRS was completely confused and it was just not working as well as we hoped for. So the second approach, that was using the old iNav AHRS and just update that one with the needed math from program from ground up, that was the way to go, and this is how it's done and implemented now in iNav 6. And that's also the reason why the iNav 6 feature preview 1 was released, because iNav 6 was delayed to March. Usually it would have been released in December, but it was delayed to March because of a lot of other features that were not ready yet. And Pavel, Darren and we decided, hey, we need to test that thoroughly. So we made that feature preview release mostly just because we want to see this AHRS flown in the field, tested, and looked for the reliability and stability.
So is this the headline feature for version 6 then?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. That's why the iNav 6 nickname is Horizon Hawk.
Got it.
So yeah, and there are also a ton of smaller features coming, maybe not implemented yet. For example, one nice thing for very big craft is this would also have helped Adam G for his launch. A nice little feature that Darren programmed after my idea is wiggle to wake launch idle. So what you basically do, if you have auto launch set up and you have idle throttle also set up where the motor already spins before you throw the plane, you can trigger the idle throttle by wiggling the tail of the plane. You basically do a yaw movement, left, right. I think 2 times, left, right, left, right.
And then throw it.
Exactly. And this will trigger the idle throttle. So then the motors will spin up and then you can just throw it. There was a feature with a timed idle before where you can set up, I think, up to 60 seconds delay after you throttle up. The timer runs, and then after the set time, the idle throttle starts. But that has some downside. For example, when I launch my big XUAV Clouds, it's a 1.9 meter plane that's 4.5 kilos. And if it goes to idle, the idle is just 50%, but this plane makes already 4 to 4.5 kilogram of thrust when it's just in idle throttle. So I have it like here, and then I realize, oh shit, I forgot to turn on the HD camera. Yeah, you cannot abort it because the timer is running, and in the last 3 seconds or so, the beep changes. But if you want to abort it, it takes me longer than 3 seconds to put the plane back down and cut the throttle. So I had to launch. And with that new feature, I can say, okay, I throttle up, and I can take all my time, pick the plane up, hold it in position, wiggle the tail 2 times, and then motor spool up, and I can throw.
Can you wiggle it again to stop it if you wiggle the tail and then be like, oh,
no, if
turn on the GoPro?
Nah, then it's too late.
Okay.
As soon as idle throttle kicks in and you don't have the radio in your hand, you have to launch.
You really need neck straps. I mean, I think a lot of these problems are solved with neck straps. And I know neck straps are not always comfortable, but get a nice comfortable neck strap.
When you're using both hands and you've got a neck strap, you risk that moving, because launching a plane can be quite physical, and if that one of those gimbals then gets moved, you're in Adam G situation where you're flying a plane and it's just going out of control before you can get back on it.
Radio on your stomach, you throw the plane, oops, and that was the arm switch, for example. It happened to me.
I have
that I hit the arm switch with my.
Automatically. You disarm by accident, you mean?
Yeah, you could disarm by accident if the radio turns around on your belly and you hit any switch. And also the last neck strap I used, and that was when I stopped using them, basically killed my radio because the loop opened up and the radio fell down on the street. Funny enough, it was the FR Sky neck strap. Maybe that was the reason.
That'll do it.
Built with quality.
I used an FR Sky neck strap on my TX16 radio, so that wasn't good.
Yeah.
Oh,
guys,
that's FR Sky trying to tell you something. Sorry.
Yeah. That is all we've got time for, because we don't want to upset the editor, unfortunately.
Right, thank you very much, sir.
I know.
Yeah. No problem.
Hopefully we can hang out after a show, maybe head to Patreon or something. Even though Curry's allergic to that sort of suggestion.
My phone call meant I had to go pick my wife up soon. And then after I get back, I then have to pick my daughter up from the same place. I'm just constantly going back and forth to the station today. It's good fun.
Okay, fair enough. Unfortunately, that is all we've got time for. You've been listening to Let's Drone Out. The show is sponsored by our lovely Patreons. Thank you guys so much for everything you do. You guys rule. It keeps the show going. Now, the editing is even better because we have isolated audio. So the editor suffers enough. Editor, if you're listening to this, we appreciate you, and our lovely Patreons feed you.
Praise to the editor.
Praise to the editor. So, yeah, you've been listed lecturer now. You've been joined by Marc from the iNav.
Thanks for letting me be here.
Thank you. You've been a great
joining
guest.
Us. That was great.
Really appreciate it. It's some really good insight. Really enjoyed tonight. The time just flew by.
We'll have to try and catch up with the iNav crew once version 6 drops, and we can tell exactly what made it into version 6 and what didn't, and what's going to be queued up for the next release as well. So we'll catch up.
Totally.
6 sounds exciting.
Yeah. You're joined by everyone's favourite Curry Kitten.
Goodbye.
The man with the moustache, Stephen.
Thanks very much. Good night.
And I've been Brighton till I fly, and you'll be listening to Lecturer now. Tune in live 8 p.m. UK time every Thursday to watch us on YouTube. If not, listen to us on SoundCloud, Stitcher,
Apple Podcasts,
wherever you get your podcasts, it'll be there. Hopefully,
everywhere.
What's that one that your daughter was horrified that we were on? Spotify.
She said you can't be on there. That's only proper stuff. And when we were there, it sort of devalued it a little bit for
her. She just crunched up her phone, stuck it in the blender, and flushed it down the toilet. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.